Good morning, everyone. My name is Denise Lucy, and I am the Executive Director of the Institute for Leadership Studies and professor at Dominican University of California, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. We are hosting the Business Edge Briefings meeting today, and at Dominican University of California's Institute is in partnership with the North Bay Leadership Council for over a decade, offering this Business Edge Briefing series. Together, we have welcomed business owners and organizational leaders to share business strategies and techniques for businesses to be resilient and competitive in the domestic and global marketplaces. Our goals for these briefings are we want to ignite innovation, inspire creativity, and increase profits and productivity. And who have our speakers been? They're engaging and exceptional business experts who inspire and educate business leaders to survive and thrive during tough economic conditions. Cynthia Murray, the CEO of the North Bay Leadership Council, is our partner and visionary of this program. And she will moderate the questions and answers after our speaker presents. She'll also announce some upcoming events. Thank you, Cynthia. We'd like to thank our community partners, the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, a renowned organization for all of our businesses here. Thank you, San Rafael Chamber. And our campus partners include the U.S. Department of Commerce. Their office is called the U.S. Commercial Service. They're the lead trade promotion agency of the U.S. government that provides counseling and support by trade professionals to help U.S. companies to export to increase sales to new global markets. We hope you take advantage of their partnership at Dominican's campus. Joining us today is our other campus partner, the Marin Small Business Development Center, which we call the SBDC, which provides no-cost business advising and experts, assisting small businesses with obtaining pandemic funding, HR support, e-commerce and social media setup, pivoting strategies, and many, many more things to support you. In the past year, SBDC helped over 1,300 businesses. To introduce our presenters today, we'd like to welcome Miriam Hope Carrell, who is the director of Marin's SBDC. Hello, Miriam.
Thank you, Denise.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's wonderful to see you all. In quotes. We are going to have our presentation first, and so as you think of questions or if anything comes up for you, please put it into the Q&A, and we will get to your questions at the end and answer them at the end. And also we'll ask that you please fill out an evaluation form. This really helps us to understand how to best provide the content that you would like to hear. And so I will be putting that into the chat for you to click on. It will be a link. And so let me introduce our speaker today, John DeGaetano, who is a SBDC advisor and a former bank executive with a strong background in management and leadership. He has helped lead banks in growth in the past, and he has worked with hundreds of business owners, helping them develop strategies for growth, acquiring the best funding options, and advising on management and operations. And with all of these tangible results that he's helped create, which has led to increased sales and capital infusion and business expansion, he has earned the national designation of Northern California State Star for his outstanding performance in assisting small businesses. And so, John, I welcome you today. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights on creative funding options.
Miriam, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for allowing me to present for you today, and I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Going to share my screen here. So let's get there. And I think we're there. Hopefully you can see my screen, and we are good. So this is creative funding in a changing world. So these are funding options for businesses in uncertain times. And of course, you have all experienced this in the past several years, but there's a history of things, ups and downs for businesses over the years, many years. And I've studied recessions all the way back to 1890. And I find that there's some commonalities for all of them, and some unusual symptoms too as well, which I'll get into on how it affects overall your funding options. So we'll just move in here and say that this information is provided for educational and informational purposes only, does not constitute professional, financial, or legal advice. So no registrant here should act or fail to act on the basis of the material here without obtaining the proper financial, legal, or professional advice specific to your situation. And this is our normal disclaimer with our Northern California Small Business Development Centers and our host HSU sponsored programs. And this is the most current information that I have based on certain federal, state, and other appropriate governmental agency programs. And some of that is based on interpretation. So we'll move forward here. So, some of the greatest protective challenges of an entrepreneur and what they face during the various stages of owning a business is finding and securing capital. So it's a never-ending battle out there to find funds for growth, such as expansion, startup costs. Maybe you're purchasing inventory. Maybe you want to fund a current project related to operations or production. So we want to discuss several options on this. But first, let's just talk about what exactly is it? What is debt versus equity? And there are two basic ways to finance a small business. One is debt, and that's a loan or a line of credit. It provides a certain amount of money that you can use over and over again, or if it's a line of credit, you can use it over and over again, or if it's a loan, it has to be repaid within a specific amount of time. So loans can be secured by assets, personal guarantee, could be other assets, inventory, and so on, or it can be unsecured with no assets attached to the loan too as well. Interest rates are affected by those various options. And then there's equity, which is essentially selling a part of the business, also known as an equity stake. So a new owner could actually get benefits from voting rights or making in-house decisions, cash flow associated based on the agreement. So sometimes funding solutions can consist of debt, equity, or a combination of both. So we're just going to find out more about some of these options, and I'll get into them in a little bit of detail and tell you about some of the options for these programs. First of all, you've probably heard of crowdfunding, and that allows entrepreneurs to ask family and friends, members, and others towards their goal in raising some funds for the business. Online communities can participate, and really you share your story in a less awkward manner, other than in person. And certain platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, GoFundMe, Rocket Hub, and so on, those kind of programs allow different ways to raise funds. They offer fundraising campaigns without end dates. Some have end dates and so on. Some take a larger percentage of the funds raised as opposed to others. Some allow you to keep your money versus reach a goal. And some are known for helping nonprofits, or they're small business friendly in various ways. And there's pros and cons for each one of them. So it's best to fully investigate each site and their details because they are pretty much different here. A lot of times those particular platforms want you to offer something to those donors in relation to the business. So that could be an incentive, but you have to check on the limitations and so on. So a little bit of research on that is certainly worthwhile. Now, remember, if you have questions, go ahead and put it in the Q&A, and we'll get to those questions after the presentation. Next one is angel investors. So this would be for, these are private individuals or small groups. They're executives who really want to invest in certain industries by making an equity purchase. So they provide money, expertise, and guidance to help your business to grow. And angels really want to see the potential of the business. They want to see a viable plan, a business plan within a reasonable amount of time. So they want to see the business actually move in growth fairly quickly. These are usually experienced teams that they want to see to kind of ease the investor's fear, especially in a tough economy. They want to see really a seasoned team. This is a transaction and investment and must be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And you want to make sure that you are, as you know, as a business, your financials are in check, and you have that analysis in place, and you demonstrate a really good working knowledge of the market. For that investor, they want to feel that there is some confidence there. And of course, you want to retain a specialized attorney and a CPA to structure that equity sale. So angel investors are usually smaller type of investors. I mean, smaller in investments within businesses. But then we turn to the third option here, which are venture capitalists, which are larger type of groups here. They shares, these are shares of equity in new and upcoming businesses. They have the high potential of future growth and returns in exchange for an investment and a voice in the direction of the business. So these are venture capitalists actually funded, Apple, Microsoft, Google. Just to give you an example, over the years, they have certainly shown businesses to spike in growth over time. They obtain equity in highly competitive, and they require vetting from that investor on the business to make sure that it fits their parameters. So these businesses must have a high probability of rapid growth, and they're committed to an intelligent management team that prepares sound financials. So this really is, the proof in the pudding by the financials. They're committed to that intelligent management team and want to learn more about them. There is a site out there called Funding Post, which showcases entrepreneurs and company profiles of over, I think it's a little bit more than 8,000 angel investors and venture capitalists. So that might be something you might want to look at, have a look at. But here's one thing with venture capitalists. You have to understand the controls, the risks, the legality, and the enforceability of any agreement with the venture capitalist. So yes, you're keen on wanting to get funding for the business, but also there are some drawbacks on this too as well. So you have to make sure you properly understand that. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one here. So now these are SBA loans. Now you've probably heard of the Small Business Administration. SBA loans, of course, they were very helpful during the early stages of the pandemic with lots of funding options here. They had the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, but the SBA actually helps entrepreneurs get started. When banks are reluctant to take chances with a business, SBA can guarantee a certain portion of the loan to small businesses with specific qualifications. But actually, under the law, you must first actually apply for a loan from a financial institution and actually be turned down. And then what comes into play is that you may qualify for an SBA guaranteed loan. What that is that they guarantee a portion of it to the bank, not to you, but so in other words, if there was a default, then SBA comes into play here, and they may cover some of those funds to assist the financial institution. So to apply SBA loan from the financial institution directly, because SBA doesn't actually loan directly to businesses unless there's a disaster program that's in place, like the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which was one of them. So SBA doesn't actually provide loans directly, okay? There is a microloan program, it's kind of little known program that is extremely helpful for businesses that actually is funded through your bank. Most likely the bank that you work with is a preferred SBA lender, so they might have a microloan program through SBA, extremely helpful for loans of up to $50,000 or so to small businesses. So there's other loan funds, but they or requirements, and they might ask for a management or training assistance program as a condition for the loan. So they want to make sure that there's a good amount of traction when that particular program is funded, and that the business has a high probability of success. So understandable that they want to do that. So that's what SBA is all about. So remember, during the early parts of the pandemic, SBA gave out the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. It was for 30 years, 3.75, really a very good program. Actually, it's very successful. I know there was a lot of businesses that didn't necessarily, try to game the system out there and all that, but overall, they generated a good amount of funding out there, and it was a good jumpstart for businesses that were really suffering over time. This was considered a disaster loan. Even during the fires back in, just years ago, there was another SBA program too as well. So it gives you an idea of how SBA kind of comes into play when there's an issue within a community. But overall, what they want to do is help businesses, small businesses, and kind of jumpstart them a little bit, specifically if they don't necessarily qualify. So that's how, for the amount that they're looking for, I should say. Okay, once again, if you have questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the Q&A and we'll continue. Okay, next one is microloans. You probably heard about these. These are for startups or existing businesses that kind of face a capital gap. They have a lack of credit history maybe, or they're just starting out. They don't necessarily have any collateral, or they have an inability to secure a loan through a bank. And microloans usually range from $500 to about $50,000. Sometimes some go up to about $100,000. And they are microlenders. They are usually nonprofit organizations, so they're different from banks. They're actually funded by some financial institutions. Some, for example, Wells Fargo funds a couple of the microlenders out there for businesses that they don't necessarily want to work with. They're smaller loan sizes. They usually require less documentation, and they're more flexible in underwriting criteria. There's a few hundred of them actually in the United States, and the rates can vary. There are usually higher than a traditional lender, a traditional bank, and that's because there's a little bit more risk involved here. And when I talk to you about all of these, funding options, it's really based on risk. So if something was secured, for example, through collateral, that interest rate is usually lower than an unsecured type of product. So microloans are not secured by any kind of collateral. Well, they can be, but usually the case is that it's usually based on credit history, experience in the field, maybe a sense of community, and so on. And like I said, there's lots of them out there. There is a site called aeoworks.org, aeoworks.org, and it represents about several different microlender organizations for communities, and you can look that up and see, use that as a resource. There's also Accion, ACCION, or us.accion, ACCION, and these are large microfinance networks in the US, and it's similar to the SBA microloan program that provides financing for startups with sufficient cash flow. So that's the name of the game. Now, a lot of times, micro lenders want to see a business plan, a couple of years of financial projections, and maybe some history too as well. If you are already in business, if you're a startup, then you want to be able to show them where you're going with this money. So usually here at the SBA, our advisors work with clients and help them with their financial projections. I do that. I've been doing that for just many, many years. My background is in banking and financial analysis and business planning, but overall, it's worthwhile to work with an advisor on building those projections. Okay, I'll move on from here. Next one is personal financing. So of course, you know, startups can be risky, and maybe in many cases it might be better to work perhaps with your own money. It's not necessarily advisable to pull it out of your 401k, let's say, but you might have some money that you've built over time that you want to start your business. So sometimes those cases they're so risky, or the business may be so risky, it prevents traditional lenders from approving a loan. So you want to see what you can do to get there. Now, in an ideal world, you would save money over time, and then you use it for the business. You fund the business. So, and also, when you think about raising money here, it may be hard to get third-party money if the business owner has not invested in themselves too as well. So that's kind of a red flag overall. So savings or establishing a second mortgage, possibly, to explore some options there. But you want to pretty much have a real solid business plan and know that your risks are at a minimum based on your research and so on. You also, it's advisable to set up maybe a C corporation and then the appropriate plan to roll out those assets if you do plan on doing that. But overall, personal finance can be in various different ways. You could lend money to the business based on your own, funds available to you, and then pay it back over a period of time as if you are the bank itself and you are lending the money to the business. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell for personal financing. I'll get into something similar to personal financing here in just a little bit. Now, here's something that is not necessarily an option or a little known option, but it can be a reasonable choice for financing organizations, and extend in advance based on purchases or order amounts. So business can actually utilize the funds to purchase materials sooner, supplies and materials, and repay once the goods are sold. So purchase order financing, what that actually is if you are a manufacturer, let's say, and you have a purchase order from a customer, a client, you can actually use that purchase order as collateral. So qualified companies can actually deal in manufactured goods with a margin of at least 20% or more. So there's some room there to be able to make a profit here, considering purchase order financing. But you can use a good amount of that purchase order as collateral. You can use about 80% of it. Now, it's also called factoring. So factoring companies, it's a reliable source to offset cash flow issues from clients that maybe are slow pay over invoices. So let's say you have a purchase order of 1,000 widgets here, and you use that as you decide to go with the purchase order financing. You may be able to pay for that over time, and then by the time the customer pays you off, you can then pay off all of that financing directly. But I need to mention that purchase order financing is expensive, so it's on the upper echelons of interest rates. As I mentioned, how collateral is maybe the lowest interest rate on securing a loan. Purchase order financing is a little bit higher than a microlender interest rate. Okay, going to the absolutely higher interest rates is payday financing, which can be, believe it or not, 30% or 50% interest rate. And in between there is credit cards, which can be, cash advances can be anywhere from 13 to 32%. Okay, I've actually seen a client with a credit card with a 32% interest rate. Okay, anyway, going back to purchase order financing, it's expensive. Companies sell their receivables basically for a percentage, and usually it's withdrawn from the business on a certain period of time. It could be weekly, it could be monthly, and so on. The receivables exchange is the name of a organization that allows businesses to offer their receivables to factoring companies, and then banks and other lenders kind of bid on those invoices. They kind of offer what they're willing to risk on all of that. Gives you an example of purchase order financing. But remember, this is more or less for a manufacturer of goods, okay? So we'll move on to vendor financing, which is another kind of little known, but business could benefit from a longer 30-day payment plan here. Terms with a vendor could be to avoid late fees or penalties, the potential for more cash to work on the on whatever it is you're working on. So it's especially important for businesses with a sales cycle of at least 30 days or more. And equipment manufacturers at times will carry the purchase over time. So, for example, an equipment manufacturer may want to offer financing to you because they want to make sure that you buy their particular piece of equipment. So they may offer 30, 60, 90 days. They may even offer a year, 2 years, or 3-year financing too as well for you to move into that financing. Now look at it this way: when you buy a car, and you get a car loan, that's pretty much vendor financing over a period of time. It could be 4, 5, 6 years on that. So equipment manufacturers can help you on that, but also it could be suppliers too as well. They can offer you financing for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. But some vendors will offer you 30 days end of month, which is actually 60 days, or 90 days end of month, which is actually 120 days, believe it or not. Now, that's vendor financing. So now there are businesses out there, for example, Walmart will put in a purchase order for a particular order, and their terms may be net 90 end of month, which is 120 days. Now that's a really long lag time for the business that's supplying that particular merchandise, but it's a little bit easier for the business that is purchasing those items in being able to float and allowing that item to be on their shelves to be able to sell and then be able to pay that. So basically, vendors are financing that particular item with that business. So that's how that works. This option kind of lessens the load for other financing options. So you can kind of use this along with other types of programs, and it can be a better rate in term, believe it or not, like I mentioned. So the rate may not necessarily be very high at all, the interest rate I'm talking about. So when you think about car loans, when you go back to that analogy, same thing. The car financing is fairly low compared to other types of financing. Okay, so we'll move on from here. Okay, there's friends and family, of course, that option, right? It's asking friends and family, kind of a difficult task sometimes, to make an equity investment or maybe a loan to finance the business. However, you really should get this agreement in writing and have an attorney draft it, so there is no mistake here working with friends and family. But in effect, an equity investment is selling a part of the business, like I mentioned earlier, part of your company, and agreeing to a business loan. So it could be either or it could be and or both of those. So you can spend time educating the investor about the risks of the business. So it's really advisable to do that. That investor conversation should be, and this is always for investors too as well, not to invest what they can't afford to lose. It's almost like going to Las Vegas, going gambling here. You can't really gamble any more than you can afford to lose. So before approaching an investor, make sure you have a well thought out formal business plan in place, and also financial expectations too as well, and what your expectations are as far as growth is concerned, profitability, and so on. So that's always worthwhile to consider. So move on from here. Now there's contests, kind of little known about some contests, but there's lots of those out there. Colleges, local city organizations, they host small business competitions. You might have seen some of those. They allow to pitch to investors. You can receive monetary prizes. It's a win-win situation. It gives you lots of exposure, um, cash injection. You can expand your network. You can work with your business peers and experts and potential mentors as investors. And these contests, for example, I've been a judge in several of these business plan competitions. And it's really a lot of fun. First of all, I know it's great to see those businesses present what they have to offer. And they get awarded cash prizes, usually the case. So FedEx is one of those. They have a business grant contest. The Shopify has one. The US Chamber has the Big Dream Award. Let's see, there's a few others. It's a Women in Business Challenge. And then Miller Lite, the beer, also has a business competition too as well. There is a competition start guide or a startup guide on that. It's the best business contest guide, and that's through grasshopper.com. And I need to mention to you that they may not necessarily have the accurate dates as to the deadlines. Matter of fact, the deadlines might have passed, but if you actually know which of those businesses are offering those contests, most likely they do it on a yearly basis. So you might want to research each one of those that's listed through grasshopper.com. So check in with each organization for updates and for a new deadline. So certainly worthwhile to give it a try. And also with these deadlines, you might want to put them on a calendar so you know when that's coming up, and you can search and make sure that you're on board. And I find that clients that put something on a timeline and to know when something might be available have the best success with the either contest or grant programs for that matter too. Okay. We move on to product pre-sale. So this is kind of little known too as well. Launching a new product or purely selling a single item is the easiest way to raise money to produce it. And you may want to pre-sell it as well. So by pre-selling, you're offering a launch pricing, for example. It might be a reduced pricing. You can keep your expenses down. Use those funds on your product and get that to market a little quicker, maybe if you have a little jump start on funding. So pre-sales give that idea of what to warehouse, how much to maybe create. And so it gives you an option. If you get that feedback, you can consider potential outcomes and of that pre-collected funds, what to do with that. But you should have a solid timeline as to pricing incentives and when you may deliver that particular product to those who are supporting you with a product pre-sale. You can try running a campaign and maybe host a pre-sale on your website, and then also pass on the exposure, or from the exposure, the benefits of the savings onto the customer. So that's always a good option. So for example, if you're a clothing manufacturer, you have a new dress design, let's say, you want to do a product pre-sale, you may present it that way. This way you can build all of your supplies and materials before you actually have the item produced. You can purchase all of the items you need. You can get those out on a specific date or timeline, and everybody's happy. So that's a real launch of your product, especially if you're lacking the funds to get it off the boards here. Okay. Move on here to alternative lending sources. And so in most cases, they're an alternative to a bank, and they do require due diligence because the interest rates are all over the place. You want to make sure you're working with a legitimate lender here. So there are some out there that are kind of payday advance type of lenders, which is a very high interest rate, but you want to understand the terms and the higher interest rate. Not to scare you about this, but in most cases, lenders are not banks or government institutions. There are some popular alternatives. You've probably heard of them. PayPal, Cabbage, maybe you've heard of On Deck or Prosper. These are loans that are usually revenue based. They require at least 3 months of financial activity. And then the interest rates, like I said, can vary significantly. So the collection can be drawn from an account either daily, believe it or not, weekly, those payments too as well. And the terms can be anywhere from 3 to 24 months. And the loan amounts vary too as well, depending on the lender. So it's best to do your due diligence on this, that you're working with a reputable lender. And that's what I can say about alternative lending sources. So like I said, there's many of those out there. And sometimes this may be one of the last options for you, but I make sure you vet this particular lender, and it may be in conjunction with some other lending programs that you may be considering as well. Okay. Next one is credit cards. Like I mentioned, you can provide an effective way to extend some cash flow. You can get some discounts or miles or rewards from credit cards. They're worthwhile using as long as you don't get into that credit gap there of not paying it back directly, or if you're using a 0% interest rate credit card that you know exactly what the timeline here is. And so you don't get into that credit gap issue of getting compounded interest if you missed that deadline on making those repayments. Okay, it's tied directly to credit score, and it's helpful in extending some working capital on a smaller scale. Like I said, you can leverage that 0% credit card and to fund the business for a short bit of time. It does take time to pay off, so eventually those interest rates are higher. They're significantly higher. Cash advances are really high. Like I mentioned, they're usually around 19% or more. And you can accelerate repayments if you so choose to avoid that lingering pitfall that I'm mentioning about here. NerdWallet, if you go to that website, nerdwallet.com, they have info on over 1,200 credit cards side by side. And you can compare those and see interest rates, what benefits there might be, what the annual fee might be, discounts, rewards, and so on. Might be worthwhile for you to consider. Okay, we'll move on from here. There's peer-to-peer lending, and we're moving almost to the end of our presentation here. And this cuts out the traditional bank protocols. So peer-to-peer lenders are actually facilitators of the both loan seeker and the loan giver. So it's a little bit different here. These are loan givers that are within industries that are interested in lending to businesses within the industry that they prefer. So this is accelerated decisions and can be a good model in the success in this modern world of funding options. There's various different peer-to-peer lenders like Upstart, and I hope you're taking notes on this one here. Upstart is one. Circle Bank Lending is another. Peerform is another. Funding Circle is another. And these are various business organizations that lend out with terms based on education, experience in the field, could be work history, it could be credit or cash flow. They can really vary in interest rates and terms, 3 to 5 years, and they can vary in amounts too, anywhere from 5,000 to just 300,000 or so. Lending Club is another one. You've probably seen advertisement on TV for SoFi. That's another one. And matter of fact, SoFi has given out over $4 billion in loans, slightly strict eligibility criteria based on job experience, really, in some cases, and higher amounts up to about $100,000, to give you an example. So peer-to-peer lenders are kind of a modern type of lender out there that cuts out that traditional bank protocol, like I'm mentioning. Okay, we'll move on to here. Now, speaking of traditional lending here, these are business loans. So this is a loan or a line of credit, well-known product from your lender your traditional bank out there that you might be working with. And remember that, you know, your bank takes your deposits, but they also are responsible for your business growth too as well. So they should be offering you, if you are, you know, credit worthy, let's say, a way to borrow money or have a funding option available to you. So entrepreneurs usually need to be in business 2 years or more before obtaining some opportunity to raise capital. Conventional business loans benefit with a low fixed rate interest rate. And so that's worthwhile too as well. Requires more documentation, of course, with a lender, kind of stringent, timely repayment terms. So understand the terms and conditions, make sure you fully vet that on how the funding option actually works for you and the benefits of it as well. So make sure your finances are stable before a loan request. You have a proven track record of generating revenue and cash and building on cash. There's no cash flow issues. Okay. All right, getting into the last one here, and that's not necessarily a funding option, but it leads to a funding option. So it's an accelerator or an incubator. And this is learning how to grow a business. So an accelerator is usually a privately or publicly funded program. And it focuses on a wide range of industries. So an incubator can really help businesses, startup companies, provide services such as management training and office space. It's both a catalyst tool for regional and national economic development. So it's really worthwhile. You can kind of discover what it takes to run a business. You can actually be introduced to raise capital with maybe some investors that are out there. You can understand and explore and analyze data. You can learn anything from, or everything from pitching to term sheets, and working with mentors, advisors, partners, investors, and so on. So these are where sometimes angel investors or venture capitalists actually get invited to work along with the business, or at least view what they have to say about the business. So usually there's accelerator or incubator programs. They're kind of the same out there in the Bay Area. There's several that are going on. Matter of fact, I just participated in one accelerator program, and I advised, I know a whole bunch of clients on their presentation, their pitch deck presentation. So it was certainly worthwhile for them. It was a good experience for them to move forward in advancing on their business. So there we go on that. There's lots of resources out there. The U.S. Census Bureau, of course, SBA. There's the SBDC. There's also SCORE, which is retired, usually advisors that are willing to talk with you about your business. Mentor groups, of course, credit unions and chambers and websites and expert blogs and so on, and also talking with your competitors too. So that gives you an option there on all of that. So I'll leave this up here, this particular slide here, so you can review it. And Cynthia, that's it for me as far as the presentation. So,
well, thank you so much, John. That was terrific. What a array of information you provided, and some sources that I think many of us had never heard of. So I want to remind people, if you have questions, to put it in the chat. There is a recording made of this event today, so we will share the link to the recording. So anything you weren't able to capture that John shared, you can go back and look at the link and see the recording. There was a request in the questions, John, if you could share some of the links to the different places that you were recommending. You gave that long list, but no links. But if you have any links that you could share, we would be glad to pass that on to people too. So, excuse me. One question was, what resources do you recommend for crowdfunding agreements for a campaign on WeFunder?
Well, I think what you have to do is make sure you have a good presentation. So usually it's very similar to a pitch deck. So you might want to research pitch deck presentation or pitch deck resources. And basically, you're looking at about 5 or 10 slides that you can generate into the crowdfunding campaign, so that you simplify your request. And there is something in it for the investor or the donor. Okay. Yeah, that's my answer on that.
So we do have a group called Marin Sonoma Impact Ventures that does provide capital to qualifying startups. You may want to look at them, Marin Sonoma Impact Ventures. And Dominican has also done some pitch times through the School of Business, the Borowski School of Business. And then we also now have the LePage Center for Global Innovation, which is really doing a lot to try and help entrepreneurs. So definitely look at Dominican as a resource too. Another question was, can microloans be secured by either a bank or a nonprofit organization?
Can they be secured? Well, actually, microloans are not necessarily secured. Usually they would be secured by a personal, guarantee or a asset of the borrower, not necessarily a bank or any other type of lender. Also, when you mentioned about getting the links, the site to the links, I could send those to Jorge if that works. And Jorge, would you be able to forward those to our participants?
He would.
Okay, all right. So then we'll do that.
That would be great. Thank you. And we could send them along with the link to the recording.
Got it. Okay.
Can you share the sites? Okay, we just did that one. Intensifying collection efforts. If your AR are long, like days long, could also help avoid needing a line of credit, a person suggests. Do you agree with that?
Can you repeat that again? Intensifying
collection efforts. So they're trying to say to avoid having to get a line of credit. If you look at if your AR is days long, if you intensify your collection efforts.
Yeah, I do give another presentation on cash flow, and that's one of the examples that you don't necessarily have to be the good guy here because you're financing that particular customer. So you do have to anticipate what your receivables are, your account aging, and make sure that then they're not over 90 days. So remember, 30 days is a reasonable amount of time. 45 days starts to present that red flag in getting paid on that. So yeah.
Another question was, do insurance companies fall under the definition of an alternative lender? Apparently they offer lower interest rates, but they're more collateral focused.
Yeah, they are. And that's why insurance companies do offer some funding programs, but they are more on the collateral side because, of course, they're directly related to something that you have insured. So there are some options there. Make sure you understand the terms and conditions and the interest rates as well on not only that, but also all of these programs. In my banking days, that was, I reported to the president of the bank and I worked on the branch systems here, but I wanted to make sure all staffing knew that when they worked with clients that they understood the terms and the conditions of all of our funding programs.
So another question, and I feel like you did answer this, but they want to know, where do I find grants for small business?
Yeah, well, you can go to grants.gov, or you can go to CA. Now, write this one down, okay? ca.grants.gov. And that's the California version of grants.gov. But grants are far and few in between. They're around. When you research grants, you may see that they're closed. The option is to put them on a timeline and review them again, at another point in time, maybe a month from now or 3 months from now, to see if they've opened up again. Grant programs, remember, they open up, they get inundated with applications, they run out of money, and then they close. And so you're out of luck there. But sometimes they get more money and they open up again, but they don't necessarily tell anybody they opened up again. So keep that in mind.
I know when we were trying to help people through the pandemic, there was some big issues around accessibility and the accessibility to getting funding, and also discrimination against people of color and women. And do you have any particular tips for those groups on any of the special things you talked about?
Well, I think special tips on, there might be funding programs for minorities, so you could check on that. There's also, women-owned business grants too as well. You can go to ambergrants.com to see, or it's ambergrantsforwomen actually.com, and see if there's something there. But you could also look for minority-owned business assistance and see what you come up with there too.
And some of them were didn't have a bank, so a banking relationship, and so that became something that looked really important, is to develop a relationship with the bank in pursuing capital.
Yeah, and I think it is important to develop a banking relationship, and I know we have Bank of Marin on the call here today. And yes, it's worthwhile building that relationship with your lender, because they're there actually to help you. I mean, they're not only there to take your deposits, they're there to help your business grow. And like I mentioned, with a traditional lender, they do require at least 2 years of business operations profitability on the profit side. And so, make sure you have a discussion with your lender about not only your responsibilities as a client, but also theirs as well. Okay.
And I think the other thing was the need to maintain documentation. A lot of people who are starting a business or don't necessarily have all the documentation that a lender would want, and how they need to be able to understand the reason why you have to capture that and keep good records.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if you have any more tips on that, but that's what we heard.
Well, I mean, a lot of times I'll ask a question to a client and I'll say, well, what did you do last year as far as revenue? And I'll get the answer, well, I don't know. And I'll say, what about the year before? Well, I don't know. And I have to say, look, you really do need to know where you are as far as a business owner. That should be on the top of your head. You should at least review this quarterly, or be able to prepare your information quarterly to make some logical decisions moving forward. Okay.
Is there, with the banking crisis that has happened, and some banks failing, and looks like there's going to be tighter scrutiny, especially maybe on some of the smaller banks. Is there anything to be concerned about as far as a credit crunch or something like that people should be paying attention to about, how they bank?
Well, I know this is kind of speculation, but I don't think there's really any issue with the banking system. I mean, these are banks or financial institutions that have overstepped their risks in lending. So they've taken chances out there that they should have been aware of. And I think they're getting called on the carpet now about that. So.
And one thing that also came out of that was to also look at credit unions, as opposed to, in addition to banks, that credit unions. And I know Redwood Credit Union is a big small business lender. Is there anything in what you presented there's advantages for banks versus credit unions, or vice versa?
Banks and credit unions specialize in various different things. They have different focuses. For example, some lenders are more focused on the tech industry. Some lenders are more interested on real estate, commercial real estate. Credit unions are more interested in community and community advantages or growth. Depends on what it is. When you're starting to look or shop for a bank or financial institution, you want to know really where are they in the whole spectrum of funding and servicing their clients. So.
All right. Well, we really appreciate all that you were able to share today, John. It was fabulous information, and I think a lot of people got new ideas and new ways that they could find funding. So we are very, very grateful for you coming today. And if we could, we'd all give you a big round of applause. So I'll accept
Okay,
mine.
well, thank you.
I want to
Cynthia.
remind everyone that there is an evaluation form that's been posted in the chat. We really would appreciate it if you would complete that. It's something that SBDC really uses to help improve everything they do. So we would be grateful if you would complete that form. I also want to thank my partner, Dr. Denise Lucy, and our partner, Miriam Hope Carell, today for bringing this great information forward. And I want to invite you to participate in the Institute for Leadership Studies next leadership lecture in the series. And this is also done in partnership with Book Passage, and it will be on June 14th in person at 7 p.m. with the fabulous Isabel Allende. And she is just wonderful. If you've not had a chance to hear her speak yet, you would just get so much information out of her. And you can purchase tickets for that at dominican.extendedsession.com. And with that, I want to thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate you joining us today. We will be doing our next series of Business Edge briefings in the fall semester, so stay tuned for that. And thank you again for coming. Thank you again to our speakers and our partners. Enjoy the rest of your day.